By 1933, 1 in 4 American workers had no job. 9,000 banks had disappeared, taking the savings inside with them. The stock market had lost 89% of its value. And here is the strangest part: the famous crash of 1929, the one everybody blames, is not what caused it. This is the story of the Great Depression, told properly. For history's biggest crises decoded like this, subscribe to Crisis Economics. And stay to the end, because this story finishes with something you almost never hear from a central bank: an apology. 70 years after the fact, the most powerful financial institution on earth publicly admitted what it had done. We will get there. First, the boom. America in the 1920s feels unstoppable. The First World War has left Europe broke and the United States as the world's banker. Electricity is spreading, and with it a new civilization of things: cars, radios, refrigerators, washing machines. By 1929, there are more than 26 million cars on American roads. And for the first time, ordinary families can buy it all on installment credit. A little down, the rest later. America has invented the monthly payment, and consumption runs ahead of wages on a conveyor belt of credit. Debt stops being shameful and becomes modern. The stock market becomes the national sport, and you do not even need money to play. With a margin loan, 10% down buys you 100% of the stock. Your broker lends the rest. By the autumn of 1929, brokers' loans have swollen to $8.5 billion, more than all the cash circulating in the country. Shoeshine boys hand out stock tips. The Dow nearly quadruples in 5 years. The Federal Reserve can see the mania it spends 1928 and 1929 nudging interest rates higher to cool the casino. But under the gold standard, when America tightens, much of the world has to tighten with it. The boom is already exporting its own ending. Underneath the shine, the ground is soft. A fifth of the workforce still farms, and farmers have been living their own depression all decade, crushed by crop prices that collapsed after the war. Inequality reaches a peak America will not see again until the 21st century. The top 1% captures nearly a quarter of all income. And the world's money is chained to gold, every major currency convertible at a fixed price, which sounds like discipline and will soon work like a straitjacket. Then comes September 3, 1929. The Dow peaks at 381. Nobody rings a bell. Through October, the market wobbles, and on October 24, Black Thursday, it cracks. At midday, the big banks stage a rescue straight out of the old playbook. The exchange's vice president strides across the trading floor and ostentatiously buys blocks of blue-chip stock above the market price. It works for about 2 days. On October 29, Black Tuesday, 16 million shares change hands in a single session, and the ticker runs hours behind reality. Now, margin works in reverse. A 10% drop wipes out your entire stake. Your broker sells you out automatically, and the selling feeds the selling. By mid-November, the market has lost roughly half its value. Here is what they do not tell you. Then it stopped. By the spring of 1930, stocks had clawed back a big chunk of the fall. The president declared the worst was over, and the economy looked like it was having a recession: painful, ordinary, survivable. Only a small minority of Americans owned a single share. So keep the question in front of you. How does a stock market event most people never touched become 1 in 4 workers unemployed? The answer is the part of the story with no famous photograph. It begins in the banks. In 1930, an American bank account has no insurance. None. If your bank fails, your money is simply gone. So the moment you doubt your bank, the only rational move is to run and withdraw first. In November 1930, a Tennessee banking empire called Caldwell & Company collapses and drags a chain of southern banks down with it. In December, the Bank of United States fails in New York, 400,000 depositors, the largest bank failure in American history to that date. The name makes it sound official, and the panic goes national. Rumor becomes withdrawal, withdrawal becomes failure, failure becomes rumor. And notice what people do with the cash they pull out: nothing. It goes under mattresses and into coffee tins, and that is the poison. In a banking system, a dollar deposited becomes several dollars lent. A dollar buried in the backyard is just a dollar. Every hoarded bill quietly deletes money from the economy. And the one institution built to stop this, the Federal Reserve, created in 1913 precisely to end banking panics, mostly watches. The fashionable doctrine says panics are nature's cleanse. Hoover's own Treasury Secretary, Andrew Mellon, is remembered for advising exactly that. Liquidate the banks, liquidate the farmers, purge the rottenness out of the system. So the banks fail in waves, hundreds, then thousands. Each dead bank destroys deposits, and deposits are money. Between 1929 and 1933, the money supply of the United States shrinks by a third. Picture the economy as a body, and money as its blood now drain a third of it. Falling money means falling prices, and deflation carries a cruel trick inside. Prices drop about 25%, and wages and incomes follow, but debts do not drop with them. The mortgage on the farm, the loan on the store, fixed. Every dollar you owe gets heavier each year at the exact moment your income shrinks. Economists call it debt deflation. Farmers called it losing everything. In Iowa, corn gets so cheap that families burn it for heat because coal costs more than the crop. Foreclosures sweep the countryside, just as drought turns the Great Plains into the Dust Bowl. Then Washington makes it global. In June 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Act raises tariffs on more than 20,000 imported goods. Trading partners retaliate, and by 1934, world trade has collapsed by 2/3. In May 1931, the panic jumps the Atlantic. Austria's biggest bank, Creditanstalt, fails. The contagion rolls through Germany, and in September, Britain does the unthinkable and abandons the gold standard. Speculators bet the dollar is next and start draining American gold. Now the straitjacket tightens. To defend its gold, the Federal Reserve raises interest rates twice in 8 days, into the middle of a collapsing economy. The exact opposite of what the patient needs, administered on purpose. If you are starting to see the pattern that machinery, not markets, decides how deep a crisis cuts, that is what this channel exists for, and subscribing keeps the series coming. The bottom, when it arrives, is hard to exaggerate. Industrial production, down nearly half. Total output, down about 30%. Unemployment, 25%, with no unemployment insurance, no federal safety net, no social security, because none of it exists yet. On the sidewalks of New York, 6,000 unemployed men sell apples at a nickel apiece, the era's official image of respectable desperation. More than 9,000 banks have failed, wiping out over $1 billion in life savings at a time when a full day's work paid a few dollars. Shanty towns rise on the edges of cities, and people name them Hoovervilles so the president cannot miss the point. In the summer of 1932, the Army clears World War veterans, the Bonus Army, out of Washington with tanks and tear gas. Hoover is not idle. He lends to banks, he launches public works. But chained to gold and to a balanced budget, he also signs one of the worst-timed tax increases in American history, lifting the top rate from 25% to 63% in 1932. The Dow finally stops falling at 41, down 89% from the peak, a level it will not see again for 25 years. Now the twist, and it is the whole point of this video. In October 1987, the American stock market fell 22% in a single day, worse than any single day of 1929. What followed was nothing, no depression, barely a recession. The difference was the response. The morning after the 1987 crash, the Federal Reserve publicly promised to flood the system with whatever liquidity was needed, the sentence nobody said in 1930. Crashes destroy paper wealth. They do not, by themselves, destroy economies. What turned 1929 into the Great Depression was the 3 years after it, a banking system allowed to die bank by bank, a money supply allowed to shrink by a third, and a central bank raising rates into the abyss to defend a gold peg. That is not bad luck, that is policy. 70 years later, at Milton Friedman's 90th birthday, a Federal Reserve governor named Ben Bernanke stood up and admitted it on behalf of the institution. "You are right. We did it. We are very sorry, and thanks to you, we will not do it again." Hold on to that name. The turn comes in March 1933. Franklin Roosevelt takes office with the banking system in full cardiac arrest and does something audacious. He closes it. A national bank holiday. Every bank in America shut while the government sorts the solvent from the doomed, backed by an emergency law rush through Congress in a single day, so fast that the House votes on a rolled-up newspaper standing in for the printed bill. Then he goes on the radio, calm and plain, and tells families it is now safer to keep money in a reopened bank than under the mattress. And here is the real miracle of the decade. They believe him. Deposits flow back in. 3 months later comes the fix that makes the belief permanent: federal deposit insurance. In 1933, 4,000 banks failed. In 1934, with the FDIC standing behind deposits, the number of insured banks that failed was 9. Not 900, 9. The bank run, America's recurring nightmare for a century, essentially goes extinct in a single year. The rest of the New Deal builds the modern floor under American life. Unemployment insurance and Social Security in 1935, a new securities regulator to police Wall Street, and a wall separating the bank that holds your savings from the bank that gambles. Roosevelt also cuts the dollar loose from gold, and across the world, the pattern is almost embarrassing in its clarity. The sooner a country abandoned gold, the sooner its recovery began. American output grows around 9% a year for 4 straight years. Then, in 1937, Washington declares victory too early, tightens again, and relapses the patient into a brutal second slump. The lesson of 1937, never withdraw support too soon, becomes scripture for every crisis fighter since. Full employment only truly returns with the Second World War. So why does this still matter to you? Because the Depression is the crisis that wrote the rulebook for all the others. Deposit insurance is the reason you have never stood in line to rescue your savings. Social Security exists because 1932 happened. Modern macroeconomics, the entire idea that governments should fight slumps at all, was invented in its shadow. And that Fed governor who apologized, Ben Bernanke, was running the Federal Reserve when Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008. The world's leading scholar of the Great Depression, flooding the system with everything the Fed refused to give in 1930, precisely so that you would live through a bad decade instead of a lost one. We told that story in our video on 2008. Watch it after this one, and you will hear the rhyme. 1 in 4, 9,000 banks, 89%. Those numbers happened in the richest country on earth, to people every bit as modern as you. And the machinery that finally stopped them is the machinery you live inside right now. Crisis economics takes these machines apart one at a time. Subscribe so you are here when we open the next one.